Joining me now is Jeremy Saland, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney in the Trial Division. He currently works as a criminal defense attorney. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You just heard Cy Vance and Lanny Davis essentially say they can't say for sure it's airtight. Can Bragg really afford to bring a case against a former president that's not airtight?
Well, I think you have to start with the premise that not every case is airtight. And sometimes you pursue a case because you believe it's just, you believe the law points to it, and that's what we should do. But it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Sometimes you take those cases that you lose. That being said, here, you would expect that there'd be that extra precaution because a loss, meaning an acquittal, is something that the public can interpret worse than egg on the face, but as something that was more political from the onset. So it should be a concern, but I have no doubt they've also done their homework to put them in the best place possible to secure that conviction.
Let me follow up with you on that point. I mean, obviously, you've worked in the DA's office. What can you tell us about how they might approach this type of a case, given the high stakes?
Well, there's a lot of background issues that they no doubt address first. We've heard this routinely already. Was there a statute of limitations issue? It is somewhat novel if the premise of the bump up, if we will, from the misdemeanor to the felony is something from a federal crime or a campaign finance issue, as opposed to a state issue. Well, then that's something that they must have vetted thoroughly because they wouldn't find themselves here. Keep in mind, too, there may be other charges. Just because it's a 30-some-odd count indictment, as we understand, there could be a conspiracy charge. I mentioned previously and blogged about it, there could be a criminal tax fraud charge. So there's a lot of different things that are in the air, and I wish I could tell you more, but we're all dying like you are to see what's in that indictment.
Yeah, we certainly are. That's for sure. Let me play something that Bill Barr told Fox News over the weekend. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
I'm not his lawyer. Generally, I think it's a bad idea to go on the stand, and I think it's particularly a bad idea for Trump because he lacks all self-control, and it'd be very difficult to prepare him and keep him testifying in a prudent fashion.
So there was the former attorney general when asked if Mr. Trump should be on the stand. What do you make of that, and do you think there's any scenario where Mr. Trump's lawyers would put him on the stand?
There's certainly a scenario where someone in this situation would want to testify. And relying on the advice of counsel, they're responding to Michael Cohen. But I think if you took Bill Barr's quote and you stamp that everywhere, that would be a very fair assessment. Donald Trump is not your average witness. And by average, I'm not talking about a president being not average and atypical. I'm talking about someone who would be difficult to control, and you really would be fearful that he'd impeach himself by continuing to speak and say the wrong things. He is not a great witness. He's not someone who can be controlled. If I was a prosecutor, I would love a shot at him because you could probably get him off that sort of Colonel Jessup way of saying something that he should not be saying.
You know, his lawyer, Joe Tacopina, has said that they plan to challenge the charges despite not knowing what exactly the charges are. Walk us through what that would look like. How long could this process stretch out?
So a typical case, if there's such a thing in Supreme Court, once there's an indictment, usually you're on about a month to 2 months later to file motions or a response from certain motions that you may file. And then it starts to move on quickly. Remember, under New York's discovery law, the DA's office, to be ready for trial, have to turn over the entire scope of this discovery. So whereas a normal case, if there's such a thing, maybe 3 to 6 months or so, I would expect this case would likely expand and go beyond a year because every angle that they can do and pursue to challenge us, whether it's the grand jury minutes, whether it's a statute of limitations, whether it's just the facial sufficiency of the indictment, there is going to be a challenge. There's going to be a wrench thrown into this process.
Jeremy, one more before I let you go. The former president is asking for a new venue. Is that realistic? Do you expect that that's going to happen? He's arguing he can't get a fair trial in Manhattan.
I've heard that. I've heard also he wants to go to Staten Island because it's more favorable potentially in terms of a Republican, more of a stronger Republican base. I think that's just more noise. I don't imagine the judge agreeing to that or any party agreeing to that for that matter.
All right, Jeremy Saland, thank you so much for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.